Sean, we've just talked about the extra 0.5%. That's 2.5% overall for the defence budget in the UK, Rishi Sunak's announcement. I guess the first question, amongst many questions that I've got, is where's it going to come from?
It hasn't been made clear yet. The Rishi Sunak's talked about getting rid of a whole lot of civil servants as an efficiency drive. That's normally code for we don't actually know where it's going to come from at the moment. They say the books are all balanced. If you look at the hard numbers, it's very difficult. We spend over 2% now, but depending on what metric you use, is it 2.05 or 2.2? Getting up to 2.5 is about a 15% real terms uplift. They're talking about £75 billion extra over the 6-year period, gradually stepping up each year. Part of the challenge is, first of all, as a cynic, and I guess this plays more into your lane than mine, it was only a few weeks ago that this government, in its budget, where you normally quickly veer and haul where you're spending money, made prioritise tax cuts and childcare over defence, nothing for defence. Now, a few weeks later,
funny.
Suddenly, big commitment, 2.5%, and I'm not entirely sure, nobody in this country is sure what's going to happen, when the election's going to be, and who's going to be the next administration. But if the polls are to be believed, it looks more likely to be a change of administration in this country. And therefore, it felt like there was the potential for this announcement to be Labour's sort of matched everything in defence so far. And sure enough, after Rishi Sunak said 2.5%, Labour has asked what they'd do. They immediately turned around and said, oh, yes, we'd match that. And we've seen earlier on today, day of recording on Wednesday, that suddenly they're rowing back from that a little bit.
So it's a bit like a poker game, really, where everybody's up in the ante and Rishi Sunak's trying to force Keir Starmer to be the first one to blink.
Yeah, and the trouble is, at the bottom line of this, I subscribe to the view that we had the Cold War, we spent a lot of money on defence, 4 or 5%. Then we had the peace dividend, early 90s, world feels a safer place. Therefore, you can afford to spend less on defence. I mean, defence is an insurance policy against an uncertain world. It does feel more dangerous today. But I think as a military guy, even though I would love to see more money spent on defence, I'm also a taxpayer. And we've got the biggest single sort of overdraft we've had in a generation as a result of COVID, energy crisis and the like. And if you're going to spend more money on defence, you've got to take it from somewhere else. And it's not immediately apparent where that is, where that money was come from. And actually, for me, NATO is the central pillar of our defence strategy. Yeah. And yet only a third of the NATO members actually pay their 2% today.
So it seems like, to me, it's an inverse ratio. So the further you are away from the current threat, Russia, war in Ukraine, the further you are away, the more money you have to put in. The closer you are to the danger, the less money you put in.
And yet you'd imagine the countries close will be feeling the heat. Poland has just recently increased its defence spending up to 3.5%, and they freely admit...
They've been gradually rising. I mean, it's going to go up a bit more as well.
It's going to go up a bit more. Yeah. But they freely admit they're struggling to work out how to spend the money, because it goes back to our earlier discussion. You may suddenly go, right, I want to turn the taps on. But one of the points was being made earlier on today by the Defence Secretary when he's being interviewed, is that if you simply go to the shops and buy stuff from America, the danger is you become dependent on American suppliers and it's jobs for Americans. Whereas actually, if you want to spend their money in this country, it takes a while to bring, and that's why they've claimed they're going to gradually increase the money spent on defence over the years to allow industry to spin up, so that we do end up buying more weapons. We have bigger stockpiles and the like. But it's just the timing of this feels so wrong. And if I was, as a taxpayer, I would much rather see all of NATO paying their way first, particularly those countries that are close to the fire, because they're the ones that are going to feel the heat at the moment.
So where's the money going to come from? Well, the economy can grow at an extraordinary rate. That's not likely in the short term, based on the experience of the last few years. We put taxes up. No, that's not going to happen either. Or we cut something else. And the reality is we don't have any money left. I mean, if we're not careful, you know that famous note that Labour left
Oh,
the
yeah.
incoming
Yeah,
Conservative government. Rather stupid. Of course, David Cameron just carried it around with him whenever he had the opportunity to rub their noses in it. There is no money left, it said on the thing. Rishi Sunak's going to have to leave the same note.
And this, I think, for me, is one of the frustrations. We've dedicated a lot of time this podcast to money, and one of the frustrations is that as I've got older, I realised our political masters like to solve things by simply throwing a bit more money at it. NHS in problem, throw a bit more money at it. Defence, there's no doubt you can translate money into military capability. But actually, there are different ways of doing defence. It feels like in the Cold War, it was all about mass against mass. We need to match the Russians tank for tank, ship for ship, aircraft for aircraft. Then the Cold War ended and we took that dividend by just reducing the size of our armed forces. Now we're seeing with the Houthis in the Red Sea, we're seeing with the Ukrainians, they're using drones, whether it's maritime, air or land drones, really effectively. They're using technology and innovation really quickly. It feels like the nature of warfare has evolved, not fundamentally changed, but evolved. And therefore, we're still going to need ships, tanks and aeroplanes. But where's that innovation? Where's that technology? And it feels like it's time for a sort of Team UK approach. Rather than the defence industry over here, the gaming industry over here and the satellite, it feels like there needs to be some degree of coordination and exploitation that we can also export to make it cheaper for us in this country. And one of the drums I keep banging away at, we are an island nation. We're going to be increasingly interested in alliances. That's what Ukraine's going to need, alliances. Training in a military environment is festeringly expensive and it's risky. But most of the training is done in simulators these days. If you could network those simulators together, both nationally and internationally, you create a training ecosystem which is invaluable. Nobody has taken the lead off this internationally. That would be a game changer for defence. And yes, there's upfront investment, but we have the technology in this country to do that. And the point being is I think there is a different way to do defence. And the answer is to get better bang for your buck, learn from the operations that we've been involved in and have been witness to over the last few years, and genuinely try and move with the times. And that's something that throwing a bit more money at it as a political gesture, I think completely misses the point.